Hey guys, it's Mathel here once again. Want to make another quick video on the Spellblade character that I've been playing in the last Epoch, as well as talk a bit about what the actual endgame has to offer, because I have basically gone through to the point where I can make some kind of a opinion and explanation on what's happening. So just to begin with, the Spellblade got to empowered monoliths, which is the higher tier system of Endgame, and then also tier 3 and 4 dungeons, and it's gone pretty well. It was a very fun character, still using the sword that I got from Lagon, which is a pretty easy to get sword, but with the 3 LP mod on it that you can put more things onto it, that's pretty damn hard, and it's taken me pretty far. Ultimately, I think you are supposed to do like a dual wield version of this build and do much better damage, but I digress. This here is the actual empowered monolith system. If you've never seen it before, basically it's kind of like maps meets D3 rifts. You click on some of these zones, you do a quick objective, you go to the next zone over and over again, and then sometimes you'll fight the boss of that area, and then another little boss after that, and then get basically an upgrade to the difficulty level of that entire zone. So then you get more loot, and everything's a bit tougher. So it is all of a sudden a level 100 zone. Everything needs to be level 100 at that point. You get a lot more XP, you get a lot more loot, but then you're just going through these little monoliths, which, like I said, are kind of like rifts, because you just have an objective to do. You do the objective or kill a bunch of things on the way there, and usually the objective is just kill a bunch of shit, and then you leave, move on, go to the next one. And yeah, there's no like supply or demand or anything. It's just infinite, like, click stuff and run them over and over again. So people have complained that it's a bit shallow in that regard, or a bit repetitive, but it does just basically come up to the build. I think if it feels good to blast on your build, then it kind of feels good to just do these empowered monoliths and just keep blasting. So my character got to level 94 or 5 or something like that, and I didn't really feel like I was slowing down too much. I still just enjoying the process of blasting on the character, and yeah, maybe the next character and the next character after that, empowered monoliths, are going to start to slow you down mentally and think, yeah, could kind of go for the next thing. Which the game currently doesn't have and you'd be waiting for, but I think there's some promise and good chance that there'll be more content in the future. They already said they're going to add bosses or some stuff that are going to be, something real tough to challenge, but there are already some pretty difficult bosses in the game for your average build. So like I said, when I took this character into empowered monoliths, I did have to beef it up a bit. So what you saw in the previous video was, yeah, it's a pretty squishy character, but it was doing what it needed to do at the content it was at. Once we got to empowered monoliths, I needed to make sure all my res were pretty much capped. I needed to get a bit more life. I needed to get better ward generation, and then make sure I'm freezing things to some extent as well. So I did change up a few things, and I'll go over that in a minute. But then the other system that I wanted to show is the dungeons that you can also do for this game. It's also eventually level 100 zones, because the dungeons that you unlock, there's just some keys you find, and then you can run the dungeon, and then they've got their own specific purposes. You can either use one of them to like gamble gold, you use one of them to actually upgrade your highest tier items and stuff. They do get pretty damn tough, like they get some fairly large modifiers on them, lots of more health and more damage and stuff, and then you got to fight a boss, and the boss itself hits really hard if you don't have a character that can really, tank a lot of the stuff. This is the boss, and as you can see, I'm nearly dying to almost every attack, and then ultimately dying to an attack I didn't know existed, which is like some root wall thing that comes across. So they are somewhat of a decent challenge for characters that aren't, super meta and super well built. So I do expect that most people that are just making their own haphazard build probably won't be completing tier 4 dungeons, and probably won't be doing too well in empowered monoliths, because the corruption does start to stack once you keep ramping it up, and it does start to give their enemies a lot more damage and make them a lot tankier. So with well-rounded builds, I'm sure everyone's going through pretty well. This is my own little scruffed Spellblade that, like I said, I think you should probably be doing like a dual wield at the end of the day. That's what I've heard gets a lot more damage. The Lagon sword is a very good start and can take you pretty much all the way through the game, but it does get a bit tougher in the later game. And knowing that the dual wield versions are so much better means that you probably don't want to stick around on this one for too long for this variant. So this is the other tier 4 dungeon, and then this is just the tier 3 boss of that dungeon because I couldn't do the tier 4 one. Tier 4 boss version of this dungeon, the level 100 version, is one of the hardest things you can do in the game at the moment, aside from just very high tier corruption. It's a bit of a mechanics check, but also a bit of a DPS and defensive check. And then it leads to the crafting system for the endest game of your items. So that's where you have your unique items that have more potential to them, and then you smash them with your exalted items that have higher tier modifiers, and then you can create your own kind of new unique item that has bigger modifiers. So this is a pair of gloves that I crafted, which have a level 15 level requirement, but they've got endgame mods. So you can also twink out characters in the early game for leveling, which is pretty fun. And then you can build your own sort of uniques that way. And then that leads me to the fact that I, after putting down the Spellblade, have just now started a rogue, and so you might see some rogue content on the YouTube as well once I figure out what the fuck I'm doing. I decided to just make a rogue to test out the melee style of this game, and the melee style of the game in the form of a blade dancer. Apparently it's pretty snappy, and looks like I can kind of recreate a nice flail based character, kind of like double strike in PoE, and then I'm gonna go from there. So just giving it a shot, doing whatever, and seeing where I can get to with my own, once again, scuffed creation. But lastly, let me just quickly show you exactly the changes I've made to the Spellblade since the last video. Alright, so hopefully pretty quick, not much to it, just made a few little adjustments, but another quick overview of the whole character. Level 94 Spellblade, pretty much capped all res. A void, I have a ring I swap onto if I need to cap my void for various reasons, but getting fizz res up is somewhat important in that end game. Getting a bit of armor as well, I get more during teleport. I did swap over to teleport instead of surge because surge as a skill just it feels a bit limited. You have to spec heavily into reducing like its or to increasing its viability as a teleport, and then also it's a very fixed movement, whereas teleport lets you go wherever you want with your mouse pointer and stuff. So I spec'd into teleport and then picked basically like some defensive shit that gave me some armor and some more utility and stuff like ward, a bit of extra damage. So just like stuff that helped out the rest of my character. Also did respec my mana strike almost entirely to just give lots of mana. Once again, utility, because the proc stuff really wasn't doing much. So my dream of like this mega proc character was kind of like destroyed because most of the procs are kind of like shit unless you built heavily into them or something, like strictly into that one thing. Like I tried out the elemental nova stuff as well with lots of procs on this thing and built into it with some gear, and it was not doing that much. So this thing's basically pure utility, just gives us a bunch of mana. This thing got finished off and then refreshes itself with decent enough cooldown. Also respected a bit for a bit of extra damage or some shit over here, I think, which gives a lot more damage. And then this thing I respect a bit for some various damage as well, I believe. So yeah, if you're having like dual wield and using the dual wield node, then things like this make it a lot more powerful. And then Frostclaw still just does its trigger thing over here. So that's the skill setup. Hasn't really changed too much, a little bit of a change here or there. And then the passives, I also reconfigured them to do a bit more ward. So there's some various stuff on the tree for ward that, lets you tank a bit better. So some ward retention, some little cheat death sort of proc thing. That's the tree there. And then the Spellblade, also a bit more ward, I think, somewhere, a bit of mana gain or some shit. This is the ward stuff and ward int, some ward over there. I unspec'd some of this stuff because I don't think it's very good, but it's proccing at least a little bit and doing something. But for the most part, yeah, this stuff wasn't super useful. Got this other arcane shielding thing. Yeah, I still don't think this is an optimal tree or anything. Nothing too crazy. But other than that, the gear. So I did smash my sword with a pretty decent sword that had these modifiers and also 18 melee crit. So 18 melee crit would have been base crit, and that would have, I think, capped my crit. Instead, it took everything but that. So it was a 3 legendary power sword, meaning it consumes 3 of those modifiers, and I got unlucky and didn't get the crit, but it's still pretty good to have that armor shred and that attack speed. I then found a nice hat that has enchant weapon, which let me spec a bit more with enchant weapon, a bit more melee damage and stuff. The rest of the hat's kind of shit, but that is a high tier modifier. Then some good base on that one as well. Good base on this one with some shatter strike and melee damage, so a bit more armor as well once again. Got an amulet that's just filling out my thickness, a bunch of life, bit of LE, bit of crit, and then a bunch of fizz and some necrotic. Upgraded a different belt that gave me a bunch of life over there. Found a ring over here that has a bunch of life and crit avoid. Got some crit and stuff on it as well. This one has a bit of freeze multiplier with some void and dexterity. Got crit and necrotic onto this thing, and then still using these gloves. I think that's the same as before. And then I found a pair of boots that have haste after you use a traverse skill. So these are my farm boots because it is a noticeable difference in teleporting and then having that haste compared to my boots that have just cooldown recovery and a bunch of movement speed with crit reduction just in case my avoid doesn't fully go through. So yeah, those boots with the haste feel pretty good. Otherwise, we swap on these boots for everything else when you don't need all your speed farming sort of stuff. And this was good enough in the end to take me to, like, you know, corruption 150 or something. I didn't sit in one zone for too long. I didn't do too much corrupting and stuff. I was just trying to farm Lagon a bit for a bit better of a sword maybe, and then finished off some other things and did a bit of farm of another zone. So I didn't do huge amounts of corruption. I did try tier 4 dungeons, and I could clear the tier 4 dungeons no problem. I'd maybe come close to dying to some of the trash, but it was just the bosses that were giving me trouble, where I'd come into some one-shot issues. My ward can go up to like maybe 2k or something, 2.5k when I'm fully attacking and using procs and stuff. But yeah, it's by no means like a really thick character. So that's the whole build. Hope you guys enjoyed a little bit of content, and probably see you next time with some rogue action if I figure out what the fuck I'm doing with it and I'm still playing the game. Thank you very much for watching. See you guys next time.